Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. I recently watched an amazing video on a channel called Sandy's Organised Chaos, in which she used spray paints on a glittery resin base and then removed the spray paint to create a really amazing distressed look. I was so inspired by the overall look of the tumbler which Sandy made that I decided to use the same method on some resin coasters. So yeah, if that sounds interesting, stay tuned and enjoy the video. Right, the first job is to make your glittery resin coasters, and it's as simple as that. It's just a case of mixing up the resin that you need for your coasters and adding as much chunky glitter as you like. The more the better, really. And I've got some Arteza chunky glitter here that I quite liked the colour of, and I'd had it for ages, so I thought, why not just use that? I don't even know if it's still available, so actually, I don't even know what it was called, and I think I've thrown the box away now. But you know, we've all got glitters in the house, haven't we? Just choose a colour you like and put it into the resin, mix it up, and then fill your coaster moulds. My coaster mould is the hexagonal coaster mould from Moulds and Shapes, and I'm also using the mould for the coaster stand. And typically I ran out of resin, so I mixed up a little bit more to do the legs for the coaster stand. The next day they were fully cured, and here they are. One side is much more glittery than the other because the glitter tends to sink to the bottom, so I'm using the side which is most glittery. And what I did first was I sprayed it with some Rust-Oleum Gold spray paint. And once that was dry, I sprayed them again, this time with Rust-Oleum Chalky Finish Furniture Paint, and the colour is Clotted Cream. I wanted a cream colour, and the Chalky Finish one was the only one I could find. And as you can see, this is what happened, which actually is a bonus. I wasn't expecting it, but it was a bonus. And I think the reason it happened is possibly because I didn't allow the gold paint to dry quite for long enough. Right now we're going to need some acetone. I have 100% pure acetone, and I've put some into that dispenser bottle, which just makes it a little bit easier to use. Now, so the idea is to remove the paint with the acetone in the places where you want to remove it. So I've got a very old cloth and some earbuds as well. Take no notice of that little plastic cup. Don't put your acetone in a plastic cup because the bottom will fall out. Trust me, I found out. Anyway, let's get on with this. I decided to start with the sides of the coasters, and because they're going to be stacked, I thought, well, let's put them all together and do them all at the same time, and then the patterns will match up when they're stacked in the stand. It didn't quite work out like that, but never mind. That was the idea. I think it was a good idea. It just didn't quite end up quite like that, but you'll see that soon. Anyway, I'm getting my cloth, I'm pushing it down onto that dispenser bottle to get some acetone, and then just rubbing it onto the coasters to remove the paint, and do it in whatever pattern you want. I'm just going for triangles and straight lines, and yeah, just making it up as I go along, really. And as you remove it, where you're pressing down, it will remove more, but the edges of the cloth will remove less. And so what will happen is you'll end up with the glittery part showing in the middle, and it will gradually ease off, and you'll just be removing some of the cream paint instead of all of the paint at the edges. And then the gold will show through because obviously at the edges you're not pressing as hard and you're not removing as much paint. So that's why I sprayed it with gold and then with cream to get that two-toned distressed effect. So I continued in the same way for the other 5 sides. To make smaller lines, you will need something like an earbud, as you can see me using here. And obviously you'll need a container to dip the earbud into, with some acetone in. But like I mentioned before, don't do what I've done. Don't use a plastic little cup like that, because eventually the bottom will just fall through and you'll end up with a big wet patch on your table. So yeah, don't do that. Maybe a metal container would be better. So yeah, once that was done, it was time to start on the faces of the coasters. I decided to start with the edges first and make them look really nice and distressed. So it's just the same as before, getting the acetone onto your cloth and then rubbing your finger along the edge until the paint dissolves and you end up with a nice bit of glitter showing through, and hopefully some of the gold as well. And what you will find is that the cream paint starts to look a bit mucky. And yeah, you might not want all those dirty smears on it. So the next thing to do once you've removed your paint with your acetone to clean it up is to take some isopropanol alcohol, spray it either onto your cloth or directly onto the coaster and rub it to rub off the dirty marks. You might want to just leave them on because that can be part of the whole distressed feel. And yeah, it looks okay actually with the smeary, dirty bits on. It just makes it a bit more, what would you call it, grungy, I suppose? Yeah, grungy. I haven't heard that word for years. I don't know where that came from in my mind, but grungy kind of fits with the whole feel of these coasters. Right, once that was done, it was time to add my decal. If you're going to use a decal, you can add it at the beginning or at the end. In some respects, it would be easier if you added it at the end, but I really wanted to be able to easily see where I was going to be removing the paint. I didn't want to remove any paint from where my decal was going to be. So I thought, oh, let's just put it on first and then I can work around it. So yeah, you can do it either way. And I did my decal on my Cricut machine. I weeded it and then put it onto some transfer film before adding it to my coasters. Obviously, this is optional. You don't have to put decals on there, but I just thought it would look good. And I decided to put release your inner sparkle on there. So yeah, there we go. And there's the decal all in position, ready for the next step. So before filming this coaster, I actually did the other 3 coasters because I wanted to have a practice at what would work well, what wouldn't work well, and I certainly found out what did and didn't work out. One of the coasters is really not good at all, but by the time I got to this one, the 4th one, I knew what I wanted to do and I knew how to do it more easily. I found that keeping it simple was the best way. And so for this one, I just swiped it from left to right and I kept it as simple as that. Kind of like I did kind of what I suppose you would call them tiger stripes or zebra stripes from both sides going horizontally, and that actually worked really well. And this was the easiest out of all the 4 coasters I did, and this one turned out to be my favourite. But the great thing is, because they're distressed, it doesn't really matter if they're a bit rubbish, because they're supposed to look a bit kind of rubbish. Well, no, I suppose they're not supposed to look rubbish, but you know what I mean, don't you? But you can get away with the mistakes because it's kind of natural and it's supposed to look like it's been distressed naturally. So, yeah. Am I waffling? I think I might be. So as you see me removing the paint from the face of the coaster, it's easier to see what I was talking about the mucky bits. You can see them, can't you? It's not really a good look, I don't think. So that's why I've got my isopropyl alcohol in my spray bottle, just spraying it on, finding a clean corner of the cloth and just cleaning it up. And it does make it look better in my opinion. But there are still a few smears on there, which I don't mind. That just adds to the distressed look. And already you can see it's looking pretty good with that glitter shining through, isn't it? I really like this effect. Yeah, I'm glad I tried it out. Oh, yeah, look. That's another thing, gloves. The acetone will dissolve the tips of your gloves, where you're touching it a lot. And so after a while, I realised I needed to double up on my gloves. So make sure you've got plenty of gloves for this job. Right, I'm going to speed it up now because you get the gist of it, don't you? And it does take quite a bit of time, so yeah, I didn't want to make you sit through it all. Once my coasters were all complete, I decided to do the legs of the coaster stand, and I just went around the edges just in the same way as I did with the coasters. Right, once everything was ready, it was time to coat it with resin. But I wanted to protect the backs of the coasters because I decided to cover the sides of the coasters with resin as well. I don't normally do that. I normally do a flood coat on the top very carefully and it doesn't drip down the sides. But I wanted to protect the sides of these, so because of that, it can drip down and go underneath, and I wanted to protect the underneath of my coasters. Now, I've got some vinyl. You might think, oh, that's a bit wasteful, Louise, to use your nice vinyl. But this vinyl is really old, and I've been finding that it's losing its stickiness, and it's no good for making decals with. The decals just don't stick down properly. So I thought, well, let's just use it up then. And so what I'm doing is I'm putting my coasters onto the vinyl and then trimming around the edges to protect the backs of my coasters whilst I apply the resin. I'm just using an old Cricut mat as a cutting mat. That's the good thing with Cricut mats. If they get old and they start to lose the stickiness and you buy some new ones, don't throw the old ones away. You can use them as cutting mats with your, craft knife, and they work really well. Right, now it's time to apply the resin. I've put down a silicone mat and I've got some lids from some tubs that I've got just to elevate them above the silicone mat, because when the resin, if the resin drips down, if you've got them on a flat surface, it will sandwich the resin between the coaster and your surface, and you don't want that. So yeah, that's why I've elevated them. I've poured some of my resin in the middle of the coaster and I'm just dipping my finger in and smoothing it along the sides. If I'd wanted to, I could have just poured loads of resin on and let it flow over the edges, but I kind of didn't want to do it like that. After protecting the backs like that, it might turn out that it didn't even drip down because I'm being very careful, but it's always good to protect the backs. So yeah, I'm just smoothing it on the sides with my finger. Don't know if you can tell, but the resin that I've poured on is very bubbly and cloudy looking, and that's because I'm using Art Pro Deluxe resin, which is a very, very high viscosity, very thick resin, and it's very bubbly. But that doesn't really matter because it's designed for coating things and you're supposed to use it in a very shallow layer, and most of the bubbles do disperse all by themselves. But I was a bit nervous about it, so I kept using my heat gun on there as the bubbles came to the surface just to get rid of them. And so what you can see me doing here is teasing the resin to the edges carefully, and yeah, like I said, didn't want it really to overflow. It's a waste of resin and you don't really need to. Right then, so once I'd finished coating the 4 coasters, I had some resin left. It was starting to get thick and hot, and so I had to think very quickly about what to do with my leftover resin. So I decided to put the legs in my coaster stand and apply resin to that. I wasn't planning on doing that. I was going to glue the legs in and use some spray varnish on it, but I thought, no, I can't waste that resin. Let's stick the legs in, cover it with resin, and it will hold the legs in place. I was a bit nervous because I wasn't sure if that thick resin would get through the little gaps between, in the gaps of the hole where the legs are. I wasn't sure if it would drip down, and I still don't know because I'm narrating this part of the video whilst it's still curing. I've only just poured the resin and I've come down and I'm doing the narration for the video. So at the moment, I don't know what's happened. When it's cured, I'll have a look underneath. But you will find out in a minute by the wonders of video editing. Anyway, I've just poured it on the middle in just the same way and I'm teasing it to the edges. And I was struggling because, as I mentioned, it was really heating up. And I also used my finger to coat the legs as well, so everything was covered. Right then, a few hours later when it was cured, I looked underneath and as you will see, the resin had leaked underneath, but it's not as bad as it looks. So first of all, because the resin was still soft and bendy, I thought, I'll just cut it with some scissors. And that was working okay, really. But then I realised that it just pulled off because there's paint on those legs. If you pull at the resin, it comes off. It just takes the paint with it, which is fine because I was going for the distressed look, so I didn't mind it pulling the paint off. So you will see in a moment that I noticed that it just started, there we go, you see. It just started pulling off, so I thought, it might do that on all the bits where the resin has leaked. And it did. So problem solved. I cleaned it up quickly and easily. So next I peeled the protective backing off all the coasters and that did work really effectively. And then all there was left to do was to attach some adhesive felt to the back and they were finished. So now that they're all finished, let's have a look at some close-ups of them all together. They say that true beauty comes from within, and I think that this method truly does show that. What do you think? I think they look great, really cool looking. So yeah, it made a nice change to do something different like this, and I really enjoyed it. If you've enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already subscribed and you would like to, please do that too. And I will see you again next time. Thank you for watching and bye for now.